All right. So today
Okay.
we're diving into city commission meeting minutes.
Really getting into the weeds.
Yes.
Yep.
We're going deep.
Yeah.
And we're looking at Springfield, Ohio,
Uh,
specifically,
okay.
from March 12th and March 26th.
Excellent.
Two different meetings.
Okay.
And
Looking forward to it.
yeah, so one thing that kind of jumps out right away is we have our cast of characters.
Yeah.
You know, we've got commissioners Crystal Brown, David Estrop, Bridget Houston, Tracy Tockett, and Rob Rue.
Mm-hmm.
And they're at both meetings. So they're kind of our through line.
Yeah, makes sense.
And also city manager Heck pops up a couple of times.
Okay, cool.
But the interesting thing really is, and this is something I kind of wanted to get your take on, is that there are a lot of unanimous votes.
Yeah, that's interesting and really common in local government.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't necessarily mean there wasn't disagreement.
Right.
It just means by the time it gets to that point,
Yeah.
they've worked it out.
Yeah. You know, like behind closed doors or like before the meeting.
Not even behind closed doors, but just like,
Yeah.
you have a meeting.
Yeah.
You want to look good.
Right.
You don't want to be arguing in front of everybody.
Right.
So they've ironed it out beforehand.
So like all the drama happened before.
Exactly. All the drama happens before.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So tell me more about how that works, like what's going on behind the scenes.
So a lot of times
Yeah.
there are committees
Okay.
that work on this stuff.
Right.
So you might have a committee that's, devoted to Parks and Rec,
Right.
and they're going to really dive deep into the budget
Okay.
and figure out, what needs to happen.
Right.
They'll bring in experts.
Okay.
They'll talk to the community.
Mm-hmm.
And then by the time it gets to the commission meeting,
Yeah.
that's kind of like the final stamp of approval.
Okay, so it's like a formality at that point.
Kinda. Yeah.
Okay, so let's jump into this March 12th meeting then. One of the things I thought was interesting was all the stuff about properties.
Yeah.
Like specifically vacant properties and rentals.
Right.
And they made some changes to how those programs work.
Uh-huh.
So for example, like they made an update to the vacant property registration program and the rental property registration program.
And this is something that cities struggle with all the time, right?
Okay.
Because you have property rights,
Right.
but at the same time, you don't want somebody's property to be,
Right.
a
A blight on the neighborhood.
exactly.
Right.
So it's finding that balance.
So what did they do? Like, how did they change it?
So one thing I saw was
Yeah.
when you have a vacant property,
Yeah.
you have to say who your trash hauler is.
Interesting.
Like you have to have that registered with the city.
Why is that?
Well, because if you don't,
Yeah.
a lot of times these vacant properties
Right.
become dumping grounds.
Oh, I see.
And so
Yeah.
it's a way for the city to track.
Oh, that's.
You know who's
I
responsible?
think that comes back to trash.
It always comes back to trash.
Right. Because, I mean, if a property is vacant, they're not really paying attention to it.
Right. And so it's like, how do you hold someone accountable?
Right.
And that's one way to do it.
So they're trying to think of everything.
They're trying to think ahead.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So that was kind of a surprise, I thought. But then they also talked about infrastructure,
Of course.
which, I mean,
The bread and butter.
yeah, everybody's favorite topic, right? So they talk about resurfacing State Route 334,
Oh.
which, I mean,
Pretty standard.
yeah, like, who cares?
Yeah.
But then there's this whole thing about a utility easement
Interesting.
for this villa-run condominium complex.
Now we're talking.
So can you explain, like, what is a utility easement? Because I don't even know if I...
Yeah. So basically, it gives someone the right to use someone else's land
Okay.
for a very specific purpose,
Right.
usually utilities.
Okay.
So in this case,
Yeah.
it sounds like the city
Hmm.
was taking over responsibility for the utilities
Okay.
for this condominium complex,
Interesting.
which sounds really boring on the surface,
Yeah.
right?
Like, who cares?
But it's actually pretty important
Why?
because let's say you buy a condo
Okay.
in this complex,
Mhm.
and then a couple years down the road, the pipe bursts.
Oh, no.
That's bringing water to your condo.
Right.
Now, that pipe might be on your property,
Right.
but it also might be the city's responsibility
Because it's all connected.
because it's part of the larger system.
Right.
So by taking over this easement,
Yeah.
the city is saying, we're going to handle the upkeep of this.
Interesting.
But it also sets a precedent.
Oh, that's what I was going to ask. Like,
Wow, yeah.
what are the long-term implications of this?
Exactly, because let's say another developer comes in,
Right.
wants to build something similar.
And they're going to say, well, you did it for them.
Exactly.
Interesting. Okay. So there's a lot more to it than meets the eye. All right. Well, with that in mind, there's also this mow to own program that I thought was kind of cool.
I love this one.
What is that?
Okay, so basically, if the city has a vacant lot, they'll say, okay, if you will mow this lot for X amount of years, we'll let you have it.
Really? Yeah. That's amazing.
It's a great program.
So how long do you have to mow it for?
It depends on the city.
Okay.
But usually it's a couple of years.
And then it's yours.
And then it's yours.
Wow.
Free and clear.
That's incredible.
But it's a great way to encourage people to take care of their neighborhoods.
Yeah. And like have some skin in the game.
Exactly.
Wow. I love that.
It's a cool program.
Okay. So last thing before we move on to that next meeting, I have to ask about street materials.
Oh, yeah. The glamorous stuff.
You know, right? It's so boring.
But so important.
Right? Because if you don't have those materials, you don't have roads.
No roads, no city.
No roads, no city.
Right.
And I don't know if you've noticed this, but like there are a lot of ordinances.
A lot of ordinances.
In these minutes.
Yeah.
About purchasing street materials.
Right, because it's not just like a one-time thing.
Right.
You got to keep buying this stuff.
It's constant maintenance.
It's constant.
Wow.
It never ends.
The city never sleeps.
The city never sleeps. That's right.
All right. Well, with that in mind, should we tackle this March 26th meeting?
Let's do it.
All right. Okay. So this March 26th meeting.
Yeah. A lot going on.
It's like a crash course in like everything the city does.
It moves fast.
It does move fast.
Local government, there's always something.
Yeah. Like you've got to be on your toes.
Exactly.
So one of the first things that popped out to me was this whole thing about the parks.
Oh.
So they talk about withdrawing from the National Trail Parks and Recreation District.
Yeah.
And then entering into an agreement with the Clark County Park District.
Interesting.
To like manage the city parks.
So this is something that a lot of smaller cities will do.
Really?
Yeah, because it's more efficient.
Okay.
You know, instead of having two separate park districts, you can kind of combine resources, share staff sometimes.
Okay.
And, you know, hopefully provide better services.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
More bang for your buck.
Exactly.
Okay, so then the next thing, and this is
important for parks too, because they're often the first thing to get cut.
Oh, yeah. When budget cuts happen.
Yeah. So if you can find these efficiencies, it's better for everybody.
That's a good point. Okay, so then we get to all these weed cutting contracts.
Oh, yeah. Gotta love the weed cutting contract.
It's a whole section.
Right, because you got a lot of weeds.
A lot of weeds in Springfield.
Apparently.
And I thought it was interesting, like, they're not just using one company.
Right.
There's like a whole bunch of different vendors.
So there's a couple of reasons for this. One is it can keep costs down.
Okay.
Because you have competition.
Right.
And then the other thing is it creates some redundancy.
Okay.
So if one company can't do it,
you got backup. Smart.
Yeah.
Okay, so then moving right along.
Get moving.
We've got some funding wins.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah, they got a bunch of grants.
Love to see it.
Right. So they got one for energy efficiency.
Okay.
They got one for body cameras for police officers. And then they got one for public transit.
So this is a great example of how like state and federal priorities kind of trickle down.
Oh, yeah, because like if energy efficiency is a big deal at the state level, then they're going to be more likely to give money to cities that are like, we want to do energy efficiency stuff.
Exactly.
That's really interesting.
It's all connected.
It is all connected. And then last but not least, this is a curveball.
Okay.
They're switching their liability insurance.
Ooh, scandalous.
I know, right?
That's a big deal.
It's not very exciting, but...
But it's important.
But it's important. Why is it important?
Well, because liability insurance protects the city from risk.
What kind of risk?
So let's say somebody trips and falls on the sidewalk in front of City Hall. They could sue the city.
Oh.
And that lawsuit could be very expensive.
Right.
So the liability insurance would cover those costs.
Interesting. Okay.
So they're probably switching it because either they found a better deal or they needed more coverage or maybe they just didn't like the old company.
Right. So it's kind of like shopping for car insurance.
Exactly.
But for the whole city.
That's
wild.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
You know, it's funny. I always thought that this stuff was kind of boring. Yeah. City commission meetings, like, who cares?
Who wants to listen to that?
Exactly. Yeah. But it's actually really interesting.
It is.
Like, once you get into it.
Yeah, it's like a whole world that people don't even know about.
Right, because, I mean, this is stuff that affects us every day.
Exactly.
Right? Like, whether we realize it or not.
It really does.
Like, they're making decisions about our roads and our parks and
trash.
And our trash.
Your water.
Everything, right?
Everything.
And I think what's so cool about these meeting minutes is that, like, it's all there.
It's all right there in black and white.
You can see, like, how they voted.
You can see what they talked about.
What they argued about.
Well, hopefully not argued about because they've worked it out beforehand.
Right.
But you can see, like, what the issues are. Yeah. What they're thinking about.
And, like, what their priorities are.
Exactly.
Which is really cool. So for someone who's listening to this, and, like, maybe they're thinking, wow, I had no idea.
Right.
Like, this is actually kind of interesting.
How do I get involved?
How do I get involved?
So first thing I would say, go to your city's website. They usually have a whole section dedicated to, like, city government. And you can find the meeting schedules. You can find agendas. You can even find minutes from past meetings.
Oh, wow. That's so cool.
Yeah.
So you can, like, really go down a rabbit hole.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Of, like, everything.
And you know the thing is, most people don't do this.
Right.
So if you actually take the time to do it, you're going to be way ahead of the game.
Right. You'll know what's going on.
You'll know what's going on.
And then if you want to get involved, like, actually go to a meeting.
Go to a meeting.
Or, like,
talk to your commissioner.
Yeah.
Send them an email.
Right.
Like, make your voice heard.
Because they work for you.
They work for you. That's right.
Well, thank you so much for
yeah, of course.
For diving into these meeting minutes with me.
Happy to be here.
This was really interesting.
Glad you enjoyed it.
And yeah, I encourage everyone listening to
get involved.
Get involved.
Make a difference.
Make a difference. Exactly.
All right.
All right. Thanks for listening, everybody.